So I'm the lead for ergonomics within the UK R&D organisation, and previously I had a career in science, sort of man and boy career with Glaxo originally, Glaxo Wellcome, GlaxoSmithKline over the years. Okay, so GSK UK R&D. So currently we have three main sites at Stevenage, Ware and Harlow, and also a couple of satellite sites, one at Addenbrooke's, the Clinical Trials Centre that I have direct dealings with, and there's also a side shoot on the Cambridge Science Park, Demantis. So in total now we have about 5,000 staff, and that does sort of change because we have sort of contractors on board as well. And we also have to consider our service partners, and our service partners, and we have what we call hard services and soft services. So the hard services are the engineering side of things, the soft services are things such as the restaurants, cleaning, and also sort of front of house activities, things like that. And obviously, in terms of occupiers' liability, we've got to think about the hazards that we're introducing as a company to those individuals. So again, in terms of ergonomics, we need a holistic approach to what we're doing. So what are the main ergonomic activities? Well, I know this is intended as a laboratory session, but I can't get away from without saying that even the laboratory staff are going to spend a fair proportion of their time using display screen equipment. And there's obviously display screen equipment within the office environment. What's happening now, a lot of scientific devices come hand in hand, there's a computer attached to it. And if people are spending time in the labs, often they're working at inappropriate workstations. So you've got to sort of wean them away from writing up their PhDs and other such tasks within the laboratory environment and getting them to use proper workstations. Simple manual handling activities, and what we do within GSK, we did have a sort of discussion, were we going to have ergonomics, were we going to have a holistic approach to it, or were we going to keep the manual handling portion apart? And we decided at the end of the day that we would actually keep manual handling and general ergonomics apart. There's the legislative driver in terms of manual handling operation regulations, so we've kept it nice and simple. So we have an assessment for lifting and handling, an assessment for pushing and pulling, and any other form of ergonomics is then something additional to that. General laboratory activities, well, there's the big four on there. I'll come to those in a while. Pipetting, use of microscopes, fume hoods and safety cabinets, and the majority of scientists at some stage will be utilising some of those devices. And probably there's that programme on TV called Location, Location, Location. And in terms of ergonomics, what I'd say about those particular tasks is duration, 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 and that's what the key problem is for our company, certainly. And beyond that, we have specialist activities. So we've got the pilot plant and the more developmental laboratories. And there you get some really quite interesting ergonomic challenges. For example, recently been involved in a project in our chemical pilot plant at Stevenage. So there was a need to refresh the risk assessments they had there. But not only that, there's a need to implement a management system locally. So training up people in terms of ergonomic awareness, training people up in terms of ergonomic assessment, and then beyond that starting up an ergonomic improvement team, really so you have sustainability in terms of what you're doing with regard to ergonomics. Okay, I'm not going to sort of dwell too long on here, obviously, because this is really sort of intended as a laboratory exercise. But obviously what we need to do is actually comply with the DSE regs. And most of those 5,000 people that I mentioned that work for GSK on those sites, they'll be utilising a standard DSE workstation for 1 hour or greater per day. So there's a need for them to perform a DSE risk assessment. And many GSK employees work for long hours at those workstations, even in the laboratory environment as well, and it's something that we can't really forget. And certainly it's a major cause of GSK R&D occupational ill health. And it may be either directly or indirectly. I mean, certainly what we do within GSK, we think holistically about people's lives. It's the work-life balance. There's my colleague Alison in the audience here, and she works in the occupational health side of things. And it's one of the key issues, not just considering what people are doing in the work environment, but what they're doing in their home lives as well, because that can impact on their health. And obviously the way the regs run, if they are injured in something that they've done in their own time, the company still has to think about their individual capabilities and full risk assessment for them. So that's where we are. And also with the rise of all these various gadgets that are coming on the market now, even in the laboratory areas, the use of tablets, things like that, coming very much to the fore rather. So you're getting even things such as the BlackBerry devices, the handheld devices, and so I think it's called BlackBerry Thumb or whatever now, and it sounds like an antifungal problem, but no, that's the way things are. So manual handling. What we do is certainly we need to train out people in terms of manual handling. We have an online manual handling awareness package that we're just about to produce now. And in the near future, that will be rolled out to the business. So that's about 15 minutes long. We hope it's quite engaging, and the key thing is for the majority of people, if they're not really performing manual handling as a major part of their day, they'll just get involved with doing that course, and that'll be the end of it. So they have that level of awareness about the sort of manual handling challenges they'll have, and shows way to correctly lift. And again, it introduces this element of work-life balance as well. So that's one of the key elements about that as well. And what we tend to do is, as our role in EHS, you can appreciate we have over 5,000 people in the organisation. And we have a limited number of advisors. So what we have to do, we have to facilitate the business in terms of training up individuals. So we'll have DSE, for example, we'll have guys trained up as DSE facilitators. So they'll receive some training with regard to the use of good ergonomics for DSE. So thinking about furniture, thinking about the IT side of things, and they'll be able to sort of resolve simple solutions. If they can't resolve it, then it'll come to us. But at least there's that sort of element of triage that will prevent us having to get involved directly on every individual case. Manual handling, what we have assessors, and that works quite well. We have assessors who, based in the various business groups, they'll be trained up by ourselves and they'll work within the business. So again, risk assessment lies within the individual departments. And one of the issues we have in R&D, we have a number of various business communities, and it's almost as though they operate as own discrete organisations. And for example, the ergonomic improvement teams that we sort of started off on the manufacturing sites, that works well because you've got one business, it's focused in one direction. But in the R&D organisation, you don't get that, so you get specific business groups. So you can't say, for example, train out an assessor in one area and expect them to work in another business group, because the manager of that assessor will say, no, you're working in our organisation, you can't go off and do assessments for those guys. So that's one of the problems that we have. Okay, so general ergonomics. With these, over the years, these have constantly proven to be an issue. And within the company recently, what's happened is that we've streamlined the organisation. And often by streamlining the organisation, you get fewer people, but the tasks remain the same. And a great sort of example is down at the Beckenham site a few years ago with regard to pipetting. We had this scenario where they had the same amount of work to do, but they'd sort of reduced the number of people they had on board as sort of contractors doing the pipetting work. And of course, one of those people doing the pipetting work, they've got an ill health issue, which means they're restricted, they can't do so much pipetting. So that means pipetting is concentrated on other people, and they're doing even more. So it's a sort of a recipe for meltdown, really, in terms of ergonomics and musculoskeletal disorders. And one of the issues is that ultimately handheld pipettes aren't good, but if you're doing pipetting on a regular basis, when do you sort of go off and have an automated system? So the other thing is the specialist ergonomic areas, and this is probably from my point of view something that's a bit more exciting, such as the chemical pilot plant, where I can sort of get my teeth into more, and we can sort of really think about sort of setting up a system as well. Where we deal with issues directly, so we'll have an ergonomic improvement team dealing with it, they'll also have support from ourselves, and beyond that what we'll do is when we need to, we'll also employ external consultants, so people are ergonomic specialists to come in and help us as well. So that's sort of key to what we're trying to do. And this is sort of a forest of pipe work that and it makes a great picture, but I can assure you that sort of system does operate in the chemical pilot plant that we have at Stevenage. We have these vessels, and they tend to be about like 6 foot by 6 foot, and they're just sort of like a mass of pipe work like that. And if you have to go in and you've got to change the vessels and the pipe work between them, it is a real sort of problem. And the issue you have in organisations like that, you can go in and you can do your ergonomic assessments, but the problem is they failed at the design phase. So there are some quick wins. You've got to think about medium term, well, how much cash do they have to change something they already have? But really the key is going forward about designing the pilot plants, the process plants of the future, to make them ergonomically far superior to currently what's around. And other little sort of challenges like that, quite a simple little task, but again it's this issue about someone sort of bending over, concentrating intently on something they're doing there, and that causes stresses in itself. So that's sort of quite an issue. And containment work, and this certainly within a lot of our sort of development labs, and obviously there's a need. We're dealing with quite hazardous chemicals and biological materials, so we certainly need to protect the operators and the staff from the actual chemicals and biological agents that they're working with. And this can prove a real problem. It's not a very good marriage at times between the need for decent occupational hygiene and also decent ergonomics, and moving back to sort of Cranfield Man, a lot of these sort of devices you could do with some sort of octopus. You need more than 2 arms, and certainly not 2 arms coming from the shoulder, probably about the midriff as well. But there we are. So what do we do? Because obviously we have a big community out there, we've got to think in terms of a management structure, how this is going to work. So we have our own intranet. So the R&D, EHS, we have an intranet tool. And that is extremely good because it has guidance, we run a number of training courses on there, and also we have a whole series of risk assessment templates. We have an R&D ergonomic procedure that clearly states it has the responsibility of managers, the responsibility of employees. If you're a DSE facilitator, it tells you what you're doing. If you're a manual handling assessor, it tells you what you're doing. If you're in an ergonomic improvement team, it tells you what you should be doing, things like that. The other thing that we do is direct communication with the business communities. And the way we have it, each of the advisors that we have on the sites will work with an individual business. So you're working with the management in those groups. And that's quite key, so you get that interaction with the management.